Right, and Dean, so we're going to do a video analysis so you can see what I'm seeing. So I've taken my lap and your lap here. I've datumed my quickest paddock. We're now going to take your datum or select your quickest and then go to the graph. So what we can see here on the speed trace here at the bottom, or the braking here, we can see that the fifth gear here, this is where you're changing to fifth. It's not necessary. You're on the brakes far too close to that for that to be relevant. So with the longer diff that you've got in, you should hold on to fourth. If you're going back down to the 3.9, then obviously you'll need to run fifth. But that there is just not necessary. It's costing you some time there. Braking wise, we're on the brakes at roughly the same point here. You're braking harder than me, you can see there, versus my brake curve. Our ultimate brake pressure, I'm braking sort of harder here where you're rolling off the brake because you've already killed the speed. Here you can see you've killed the speed. You hold on to the brake longer than I do. You see there, look, I'm coming off the brake, whereas the blue line here, which is you, you're hanging on to the brake longer. So you can see there that your apex speed drops down. So if we then look at the minimums in the corner, we can see here that your minimum is 69.7, whereas mine's 75.3. So I'm able to keep the apex speed just that little bit higher. As far as throttle application, you can see here you're able to get on the power earlier than I am, but you're not actually pushing it. You're just sitting with light throttle on here, whereas I'm more hesitant with the throttle there, but when I get on it, I actually get on it and I hit it hard. So going up the hill there, I start to accelerate harder. So if we look at it just here as we go up the hill, so they're here at the exit of paddock heading up towards the hill, up the hill, we are currently, you're 77, I'm 81. So at this point here, I've got 4 miles an hour on you. By the time we get to the terminal at the top of the hill, go back to the speeds here, we're now 93 versus 94.2. So you've actually gained that time up the hill on me, coming out of paddock. So I'm quicker through paddock than you, I'm quicker out of paddock, but basically up the hill, you're gaining time on me, which can only be power. Because in theory, the two things should cancel out. So it can only really be horsepower going up the hill. So the car is actually pulling harder as we go up the hill here. We can see, as I say, that you just start to gain a little bit on me in this last phase here as we go up the hill. So that's the difference at paddock, and that's losing you 4/10, which obviously is your biggest loss. If we then go and look at druids, so if I select my best druids and select your best druids, there's nothing in it. We're actually exactly the same. Now we do take differing lines here. I take a line that takes me straight into the apex, whereas you go slightly deeper and pull the car back. So what we can see when we look at the graph here is this is me able to carry more speed in because I'm taking a more direct route than you are. This is you able to pick up the power slightly earlier than me because you've got the car rotating and got it slightly straighter. So the two things actually cancel out, and we end up with virtually exactly the same lap time as we come out. You can see there, as we're going in, I gain, what do I gain? 3/10 on the way in. You gain 3/10 on me in the mid corner, and we end up exactly the same on the way out. So there really is nothing in it as far as the techniques are concerned. I brake slightly later than you. I take the brake slightly further in than you. You're on the power slightly earlier than me. That's just a slight technique difference. But as it turns out, the two things are exactly the same. Obviously, the time coming out of the corner again here, if we look at the exit here, and we look at the terminal speed, so this is the exit speed coming out of Druids, we're looking at 54.52. So you're a couple of miles an hour down on me at that point. If we look at the terminal speed by the time we hit Graham Hill, we are 83.83. So again, you pull that 2 miles an hour back on me on the way out of the corner. Even though we exit at exactly the same speed, you're able to gain time on me down the hill. So again, the car is just pulling that little bit harder with what you're doing than what it was when I was driving. So if we go and have a look at the best Graham Hills, so if we pull this up here, and again, we'll select your best. So if we look at it, your best is, where's it gone? 2.4 there. So if we have a look at this here and go and have a look at the graph. So what we can see here, again, braking wise, we are about the same point, but you're fractionally harder than me on the brakes on the way in. So there, look, you just take a tiny bit more speed off than me, and that's that loss there. The problem you've got there is you actually come off the brake and then you reapply it here. So that actually then kills your apex speed. So again, if we look at your minimum speeds here and pull that up, we can see that you're running 55, I'm running 59. So I'm about 4 miles an hour quicker on the apex than what you're running. Power-wise on the way out, now this is where it's telling. Because I've got more apex speed than you. On the way out though, here, this wiggly line is wheel spin. So I'm not getting traction coming out of Graham Hill. I'm getting a lot of wheel spin. I'm losing drive coming out the corner. Whereas you've got much better drive. You've got traction there. You're actually getting the car to pull out of the corner better. So that could be the slightly longer diff that's stopping the wheel spin. It could be slightly better tyres. But whatever's happening, you're getting better traction than me coming out of the corner. So what that again is giving us, if we look at the terminal speed by the time we get to Surtees, that is giving us 95 versus 96, nearly a mile and a half quicker by the time we actually get to the lift-off area for Surtees. So again, the car's just pulling that little bit harder. All this traction, all it's doing really is getting you the time back that you lost from the apex. So if we look at it, by the time we get to here, we're equal, and then the power and all the diff, but the changes in the car actually mean that you start to gain time on me as we head towards Surtees. So let's go and have a look at Surtees. So again, if we pull my quickest Surtees up, which is already selected, versus your Surtees, we can see that here you're losing about a tenth on me at Surtees. So if we pull the video, the data up on that, so what we can see here is it's a time loss all the way through, and I'm just here, just there, just getting on the power, or easing off the brake, getting on the power fractionally earlier than you are. And all that means is I'm just carrying a little bit more speed through. As we come out, again, I'm on the power fractionally earlier than you here. Not by much, but it's just meaning that I'm able to carry just that little bit more speed between Surtees and clearways. If we look at it here, we can see I'm running 78, you're running 81. Sorry, the other way around, you're 78, I'm 81. So I'm just able to come out of the corner just with that little bit more power because I'm on the power just that fraction sooner than you are. So we can see it just here on the longitudinal there. Just on the power, just fractionally harder there. Once I get on the power again, that you're actually pulling more G between Surtees and clearways. So again, it could be the diff, or it could be just that little bit more get up and go that the car has than it potentially had when I was driving. So if we go back and look at clearways, so again, if we datum my best one, which is just here, and if we look at your best, so we are running virtually identical times through that sequence. So the difference in technique here, we can see on the speed trace. So here on the brakes, I brake a chunk later than you and lighter and more progressive on the brakes, whereas you hit the brake much harder. So we can see here that you lose quite a chunk of speed on the way in. So you're actually losing yourself 0.2 of a second on the way into the corner. Once we're into the corner, you actually pick up very light throttle very early, but you do nothing with it. The problem you've got with that is you're only maintaining. You're not actually making the front work. So in theory, you're actually limiting the front grip that you've got available. So I would try and avoid that and try and actually trail brake into it to keep the weight over the front. So we need to get you braking slightly later there, lighter, and actually carrying a bit more speed in. What it does do, you'll see there that the speed, the lap time, you actually gain that 0.2 back. Because by the time we get to just here, if we pull the track map up, we can see at the apex just there, you've pulled 2 miles an hour on me by the time you get to that point. So I've gone in a chunk quicker than you, but because you've touched that power that little bit earlier, you've brought the apex speed up fractionally higher. Again, I was struggling a fair bit with understeer through there on the entry, and then struggling with wheel spin coming out. So again, I think it was probably a tyre issue. We can see the wheel spin here. So if you look here on the blue, this is you here. So again, you're getting wheel spin, but so am I. We're both getting wheel spin coming out the corner, just there. The thing I do notice here, though, again, by the time we get to the terminal, so we're starting from you being fractionally quicker on the apex, but being lighter on the power out than I am here. So by the time we get to this point, just here, let me just bring that back so we can see where we're looking. So by the time we get to the point where we're heading out to the left-hand edge of the circuit here, at this point here, I'm pulling 69.4, you're pulling 67. So I'm 2.5 miles an hour quicker than you at that point of the corner. So we go back there. Just there, I'm pulling 2.5 miles an hour quicker than you. If we then go back again and look at the terminals, by the time we get to the sort of point where it's actually just before the start line, this one bit, but we can see here that I'm pulling 115, you're pulling 116. So you've taken that 2.5 miles an hour that I was carrying more than you, and you've converted that into 1 mile an hour more at that point. So again, you're either getting better traction, or the diff, or just the extra power is actually, is dragging you some time back. If we then go and look at the actual terminals, so going on to the next lap. So my quickest paddock is lap 3. So if I look at lap 4 here, and I datum that, and then we pull yours up. So your quickest was lap 6. So if we look at lap 7 here, I think I did look at that. I'm pretty sure you hit traffic. So if we pull those up there, yeah, look, you've got a big lift off there. So let's go back. Let's just go back to your quickest, and we'll just find out where that is. So lap 5. So if we look at the terminals now, what we can see, terminal speed by the time we get into the braking area at paddock. So if we look at it somewhere about there, so I'm pulling 117, you're pulling 118. So you're gaining the 2.5 miles an hour coming out of clearways by the time you get to the start line, and you're holding that. You're converting that 2.5 loss into a 1 mile an hour gain, and you're holding that right the way till you get to paddock. So again, that comes down to either the diff or just that chunk extra power. So what I'm seeing with this is the fact that I'm carrying more speed in than you generally. Apex speed, I'm carrying more apex speed. Coming out of the corner, you're gaining most of that time back in most cases. Wherever there's a straight long enough to actually use it. So I'm pretty sure from what I'm seeing that either it's a diff or the extra power. Now in theory the diff should hamper you because you've got a longer diff in, which means the car is not going to punch as hard out of the corners. So the fact that you're actually quicker than me coming out of the corners with a longer diff in would tend to suggest that the extra power is overcoming that diff and you're still beating me. So if you put a 3.9 in with the extra power, then obviously it's going to be a chunk quicker coming out the corners because the thing's just going to take off. So that's kind of what I'm seeing there. As far as your session lines, etc., all look absolutely fine. There's no issue with that. There's just a couple of bits. So the points that I've picked up on, with the diff that you currently have in, you do not need to go to 5th. Going down the pit straight, you could hound to 4th, which would then also potentially give you the option to go to 3rd for paddock, because the revs are far too low looking at the video. It's not pulling 7. It's nowhere near that. It's much lower in the rev range. So you could potentially go down to 3rd. You'd still only have 1 gear change to do then, which would then give you much more punch out. Your line and technique, etc., is slightly different to me at Druids, but we end up with exactly the same end result, so I wouldn't bother messing with that too much. Graham Hill was braking a little bit too hard, taking the apex speed away, but you are getting better traction and better drive out than me. Surtees again, we're just lifting just that little bit more than I am. I'm on the power just a fraction sooner. That's allowing me to just make up that little bit of time between the two. Line wise at clearways we are similar. We're both getting wheel spin coming out of it, but you're able to actually get some drive onto the straight. So I'm 2.5 miles an hour quicker than you exiting clearways, but by the time we get to the start line, you've pulled that back and have then gone 1 mile an hour quicker. So again, that is either a diff or the extra power. So it'll be interesting to see when you put a 3.9 in it. I think the 3.9 probably will be better for the shorter circuits. I think looking at it, the gearing just seems a little bit wrong for the shorter circuits, such as Brands. The gearing doesn't seem right to me. The revs are very low going through the corners, so we're not getting the punch out. So the fact that you're able to keep the lap time as you are points to the fact that the extra power, is overcoming that diff, and it's not causing you any loss. Okay, hope that makes sense. I couldn't get the video on here because it was single lap versus thing. I couldn't make them gel. So what I've done is looked at the video separate to give me the information, then looked at the data to actually get it out. Okay, if you've got any questions, mate, get back to me, and I will see you soon. Okay, mate, cheers.